Hammond-Harwood House Museum, a circa 1774 mansion located on Maryland Avenue in Maryland's capital of Annapolis, is pleased to present the Cooking Up History series of videos designed to teach social studies through the study of food, cooking, and recipes. This episode is all about everyone's favorite topic, chocolate and its history. And at the end of this video, you will even learn how to make chocolate from scratch in your own kitchen with a blender. These videos are designed to enhance the Grade 5 Maryland Social Studies curriculum standard that promotes the study of people of the United States and the world to acknowledge the diversity and commonality of the human experience, but can be enjoyed by anyone at any age. My name is Joyce White, and I'm a food historian. These are pictures of me cooking using an open hearth fireplace that was built in the 1830s. I cook lots of fun and tasty recipes from cookbooks that are hundreds of years old. You can learn a lot about people by studying their food, dining traditions, and cooking techniques. This is the cover of one of the cookbooks I use. It's called Modern Domestic Cookery and Useful Receipt Book. It was written in 1819 in England by a woman named Elizabeth Hammond. By the way, she's of no relation to anyone who lived at Hammond-Harwood House. However, a copy of this book belonged to Frances Lockerman. She lived in the Hammond-Harwood House from 1811 until 1857, so I am sure recipes from this book were served to her family and guests. Food and recipes are important to the study of history. First, the foods we eat reflect where we live. For instance, living by the sea, inland, or near an important port where ships bring foods from all over the world all impact the food choices people make. Second, the amount of money you have to spend on food is also important. Can you afford to buy expensive spices from countries thousands of miles away, like the Spice Islands of Indonesia, where nutmeg, mace, and cloves were found? Or are you only able to afford homegrown herbs and spices? Today's topic is called Discovering Chocolate Secrets. While most people love to eat chocolate, many do not have any idea where it comes from or how it's made. The goal of this short video is to help unlock these secrets and make clear how seeds of a tropical fruit are transformed into a luscious confection, while also understanding a bit about chocolate's fascinating history that goes back centuries. We are going to begin by getting to know a bit about cacao, the natural resource from which chocolate is made. Cacao is short for Theobroma cacao, the name of the tropical trees that produce fruits called cacao pods. Cacao trees come in many different varieties. Cacao trees are native to the tropical zones of South America. They grow very well in the humid forests surrounding the tributaries of the upper Amazon region, which is where it is believed cacao originated. Evidence suggests that cacao was first used by humans in Ecuador, dating back more than 5,000 years. Residues of theobromine, a naturally occurring chemical found in cacao, were found in pottery shards of containers used to hold a liquid made from the cacao. Over the course of hundreds and thousands of years, cacao trees expanded into a wider area of the tropical Americas, spanning not just South America, but Central America and Mexico and North America. At some point between 2000 and 1000 BC, wild cacao was being used by the Mocaya people who lived in southwest Chiapas, Mexico. Traces of cacao's signature chemicals, theobromine and caffeine, were found on pottery shards dating that far back. Mexico is considered the region where human use of cacao and chocolate flourished. From then on, chocolate was consumed by the numerous cultural groups that came and went over the course of the following centuries. The Olmec were probably the first people to domesticate or farm cacao trees, rather than harvesting cacao solely from wild trees. It is also believed that the word cacao comes from the Olmec word cacao. Following the Olmec came the Maya, then the Toltecs, and then the Aztecs, who were the dominant culture group inhabiting Mexico when the Spanish invaded and conquered the region in the 1500s. Spaniards in Mexico watched how the Aztecs made and used chocolate, and they wrote about what they saw and also drew pictures. Father Bernardino Sahagún recorded much of what we know about how the Aztecs made and used chocolate. From these records, we also know that the Aztecs consumed chocolate mainly as a drink mixed with many different types of plant flavorings, and sometimes honey and/or corn masa flour. By the early 1600s, the knowledge of chocolate spread from Spain to many other European countries. Chocolate was very expensive in Europe because it came from far away in the Americas, and also because many European countries placed high taxes on chocolate imports. As a result, only wealthy people could afford it. It was a popular breakfast drink in Europe, as you can see from these paintings. Chocolate was a bit cheaper in North America because of its close proximity to where cacao was grown in Mexico and further south into South America. Plus, being so close made it possible for cacao beans to be smuggled or illegally sneaked into North America, making chocolate more affordable because import taxes were avoided. The earliest reference to chocolate being sold in North America occurred in Boston, Massachusetts in 1670 when two women applied for a license to run a coffee and chocolate house. The earliest date chocolate is found in Maryland records is 1678, revealing that two innkeepers from St. Mary's County owned balls of chocolate. This makes sense because innkeepers sold hot drinks such as coffee, tea, and chocolate. In colonial America, when there was no refrigeration, chocolate-making businesses were usually located in northern, cooler colonies like Massachusetts, New York, and Pennsylvania, because chocolate needs cool air to harden. Only two chocolate grinding businesses are known to have operated in the South. One was in Charleston, South Carolina, and the other was in Maryland, in Annapolis. We know Isaac Navarro operated his chocolate business in Annapolis in 1748 because he advertised it from October through December of that year in the Maryland Gazette newspaper. Now that you know a bit of history about cacao and chocolate, we can turn to the really fun part, learning how to transform the raw seeds found inside cacao pods, referred to as cacao beans, cocoa beans, or chocolate nuts, into the delicious chocolate we know and love. The first step to making chocolate from cacao is harvesting. Though cacao originated in the Americas, it is grown in tropical zones all over the world now, especially in West Africa. Because cacao grows in the tropics where it is warm all year long, it can be harvested at any time. However, the largest harvests are produced in the late fall, early winter, and in the spring. Cacao harvesters know when to harvest the pods from experience. They can tell by looking at them and knocking on the hard surfaces to hear if they make the right sound. Pods on one tree can ripen at different times, so care must be taken to only pick those that are ready. The first thing that needs to be done once the pods are picked is to break them open and scrape out all of the seeds onto banana leaves or tarp. This is done right on the spot near the cacao trees. The seeds, which I will now refer to as beans, inside the cacao fruit pod are surrounded by a sweet and sour pulp called baba. Can you see it in this picture? You can suck the fruity baba off the seeds. However, the seeds themselves are not yet chocolate or even edible because they contain a lot of acid, which makes them very bitter. To turn raw, bitter cacao beans into edible chocolate, a very important step is necessary called fermentation, a process that can take up to a week. Fermentation of the beans occurs when yeast and bacteria from the air settle on the sweet baba surrounding the seeds. When this happens, chemical reactions take place that make the seeds less bitter and help them start developing chocolate flavor. Also, exposure to air during fermentation causes the beans to darken. This is called oxidation. This box contains cacao beans in many different stages of fermentation, so you can see how the beans completely transform and darken. Here they are before fermentation. They are white and covered in pulp. This is an early stage of fermentation. You can see them start to change. Now they are really changing and getting darker. After several days to a week, they completely ferment and develop a dark chocolate color. The next step is drying. This is usually done outside under the sun, but can also be done inside. After drying, the beans are shipped all over the world where chocolate makers will finish the process of turning them into chocolate. Large and small chocolate makers all around the world must complete the process of turning cacao beans into chocolate. To finish developing the rich flavor of chocolate, the beans must be roasted. Before modern technology came along, the beans were roasted over hot coals in the fire like this. They can also be roasted in a skillet on the stove or in an oven. These are easy ways to do it in a home kitchen. Small-scale chocolate makers often use a drum roaster that rotates continually. Of course, very large chocolate factories must use very large roasting machines. The milky pulp on the raw beans contains fibers. After fermentation, drying, and roasting, these fibers help form a papery shell on the beans that needs to be removed. This can be done by hand or machine. Nibs is the name for the material left after the shells are removed. Nibs are still not quite chocolate, but once they are ground, chocolate is made. The grinding cracks open the fibers in the nibs, allowing the fat, called cocoa butter, to release and melt. The more those fibers are ground, the smoother the chocolate will be. Now I'm going to show you how to roast and husk cacao beans. Then I will show you how the Aztecs and early Europeans did it, and then move forward in time to show you some easier ways to do it today. One way to roast the beans is to use a frying pan. Place the beans in the pan and make sure to spread them out evenly, and then remove any debris that might be mixed in with the beans. Making sure you have adult permission or supervision, roast the beans on medium-low for about 10 to 15 minutes, and make sure to turn them a lot so all sides are heated. Once you start to smell chocolate, remove the pan from the stove. When the beans are cool enough to touch, remove one and crack it open and taste it. If the shell comes off pretty easily and it tastes like chocolate, then the beans are roasted enough. If the beans have an acidic or vinegary taste, stop peeling them and return them to the heat to keep roasting until done. Once the beans are completely roasted and cool to the touch, remove the shells and place the nibs in a mortar and pestle and beat them until they fall apart into small pieces. If you don't want to roast whole cacao beans, you can use raw, unroasted nibs, which were likely roasted just long enough to loosen the husks. To finish roasting these nibs, place them on a parchment-lined baking sheet and bake for 5 to 6 minutes in an oven heated to 325 degrees Fahrenheit. An even easier method is to skip the roasting step altogether by using fully roasted nibs. The first method I'm going to show you for grinding nibs is the ancient way, using a mano metate, or grinding stone and roller. The metate is the large bottom portion and the mano is the roller or grinding tool. This metate, made with volcanic stone, is the same as the ones the Aztecs used. The Spanish and other Europeans made them out of granite. Hot coals or sterno fuel is used to heat the bottom of the metate so that the surface heats to 90 to 100 degrees Fahrenheit. That's warm enough to melt the cocoa butter in the cacao, an important step in turning the nibs into liquid chocolate. To get started, about 1 cup of nibs are placed on the heated stone. Then the mano, or grinding tool, is worked back and forth over the nibs. Also, it's important to press down on the mano at the same time. The pressure from leaning your body weight on the mano and the friction from scraping it back and forth are breaking apart the fibers in the cacao. When the fibers break open, cocoa butter is released. The heat from the warm stone melts the cocoa butter. This is what turns the nibs into actual chocolate. The more you work the chocolate, the smoother it will be. It takes me about an hour to get chocolate smooth enough to use in hot chocolate. If you don't work it enough, the chocolate feels like it has sand in it, and that is not good. And here's the chocolate, fresh off the metate and ready to use. Now I am going to show you the second method using a modern electric grinder called a melangeur. I like to use it to grind nibs roasted in the oven. Though this is not a stone metate, the base of the drum and the rotating wheels of the melangeur are all made of stone, so our chocolate will still be considered stone ground. To assemble the melangeur, the wheels are inserted and locked in place. It's now ready to use. I am now loading the melangeur by alternating the nibs with sugar. The melangeur is now working, and I am loading it with nibs and sugar. The spatula is used at the start to force the nibs to spread out so they don't clump in one area. This stops happening once the nibs start to turn into a liquid chocolate. This is a time lapse showing how the chocolate changes over the course of an hour. Remember, the longer it grinds, the smoother the chocolate will be. If I owned a chocolate shop, I'd allow the melangeur to work the chocolate for about 1 whole week. It sounds crazy, but that's how good velvety chocolate is made, and that's why it's very expensive. You've now seen me make chocolate with a metate and a melangeur. I am guessing you won't have either one of those on hand. Don't worry, I'm going to show you a way to make chocolate at home with something you actually might have on hand, a blender. For every cup of freshly roasted, still warm cacao nibs, you will need about 2 tablespoons of melted cocoa butter, available to order online. The cocoa butter helps get the process going in the blender. Put the nibs and cocoa butter in the blender and blend on high for at least 15 to 20 minutes. Stop every few minutes and scrape down the sides. The longer you blend, the smoother the chocolate will be. Once blended, add sugar. For every cup of chocolate, I like to add half a cup of sugar, but you can add as much or as little as you like to suit your own taste. These are loaves or cones of sugar. This is how sugar was sold until the end of the 19th century. You would have to chop off pieces and grind it up yourself. Right after your chocolate is made, drop it in rounds onto parchment paper to allow it to cool into tablets, just like the ones you see in this painting from 1770. This method works well enough to get a chocolate that can be used to make hot chocolate, but it can't provide a chocolate refined enough to make into super smooth chocolate candy. If you find that your hot chocolate still has sediment in it, you can simply strain it through a sieve lined with a clean cotton cloth. Speaking of hot chocolate, here is a good method to use for making it. Heat 8 ounces of water or milk to about 100 degrees Fahrenheit. Then add 2 ounces of sweetened grated chocolate to the hot liquid and whisk until melted. I hope you enjoyed learning a bit about the history of chocolate and learning how it is made. Of course, I did not cover how the very large chocolate companies make their chocolate, but needless to say, they use very large industrial machinery to give their chocolate a smooth and velvety texture. Good luck making your own chocolate from scratch. You can find recipes and more information about chocolate on my website at www.atasteofhistory.net. Click on the drop-down menu called More. The Recipes, Articles, Videos menu will pop up. Then, scroll down until you see the chocolate category. Click on it for numerous chocolate recipes. There are hundreds of recipes, articles, videos, and more on my website that you may enjoy, so take the time to explore the whole website. You can ask me questions using the Contact Submission page on the More drop-down menu. You can also visit www.hammond-harwoodhouse.org for information about the house's history and architecture, tours, educational programs, special events, membership, and more.